I believe that sometimes it can be. Just like people judge comic books wrongly, just like people judge art wrongly, I think that really, as they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And if you find a manga that speaks to you, then that's just as valid a form of art as anything else. I mean, let's be honest, there's tons of trash literature out there, and you can't degrade and say that all literature is bad because there's a few bad stories out there. Some manga is terrible, some manga is fantastic. It's really just a matter of the author and how much effort and time they put into it, and how much effort and time you put into finding good literature. It's really no different than finding a good book to read. Well, yeah, I mean, just because something has visual stimuli in it doesn't mean that it's negative. I mean, good lord, we go to see movies all the time. We go to art shows. We applaud visual art, and to say that it's somehow invalid just because you're combining it with a story and having it tell a story is silly. Some of the art in mangas is some of the most beautiful artwork that I've ever seen, and the fact that they can use that art to tell a story and tell a good story, I think lends credence to the manga as a form of art and something that should be cherished rather than shunned away. It could. I mean, it certainly could. I think that having being forced to learn any story can help you. I think reading any kind of literature is helpful in developing young minds. I mean, just the fact that it happens to be a visual medium as well doesn't necessarily detract from its qualities and its benefits. Now, whether or not it's going to help you be able to understand Shakespeare, I doubt there's any manga specifically that's going to help you understand Shakespeare. But yeah, any type of story where you're having to keep track of multiple characters, where you're having to keep track of complex storylines, so yeah, that's going to help you to expand your ability to track larger stories and larger plots in more advanced literature later on in life. So, well, I don't necessarily think that it's going to affect them one way or the other. I think that a kid that is into manga is going to be into manga no matter what. I don't think that it's necessarily that the manga affects their personality so much as their personality dictates whether they're going to follow manga. It's just like a kid being interested in a certain action films as opposed to romance films or something like that. It's just a genre. Manga is a genre. If you're into plays, then you're going to read a bunch of plays. If you're into science fiction, then you're going to read a lot of science fiction. If you're into manga, you're going to read a lot of manga. So I don't think you can say that it's going to positively or negatively affect their personality. Now, whether or not they're going to get obsessed with it, again, that has to do with their already predetermined personality. I mean, I think if you're going to get obsessed with manga, you're probably going to get obsessed with anything you read. If you're into sci-fi and you get obsessed with it, you're going to be obsessed with sci-fi. It's just the way it is. I don't think that manga, in and of itself, is capable of making a child obsessed or not. I think that has to do with the child himself or herself. They can. Certainly, if you're going to make an AMV, a music video, an anime music video, where you're cutting up scenes from anime and putting it together with music and learning how to do that sort of technical thing, yeah, sure. I mean, that can benefit you later on in life if that's your thing, if that's something that you're interested in. There are lots of careers out there in video editing and things like that you could pursue. If it inspires you to write fan fiction, now I'll be honest, I've read some terrible fan fiction, but there's some pretty good stuff out there if you know where to look. And so, yeah, if that helps you to pursue a career in writing, if that helps you to pursue your passion of writing, then sure, why not? If they give you a universe that you can already sort of use as a way to sort of get your feet wet in the writing, then yeah, sure, go for it. Yeah, I think all those pursuits can be beneficial and to really help kids discover their passions and to perfect an art and to learn an art. I think that manga can be a good place to start. I think that manga can help people who don't like to read, who struggle with reading, to develop a love of reading. I know that I myself personally hated to read books when I was a kid because there weren't any pictures. That was boring. Right? I wanted my picture books from when I was a little kid. Those were what I loved. But, as I grew up in the 90s, comic books were a big fad, and so I read a lot of comic books. And eventually I branched out from comic books and began reading real literature. I don't want to say real literature, but I began reading more substantial literature, more complex literature, more, those books without pictures. And if manga helps an individual to sort of bridge that gap and move on to more substantial works of literature, if it helps them or get that passion for reading, then sure, that can certainly help their literacy.
What are your feelings toward installing appropriate manga in the school curriculum?
Ooh, that's tough. Because then you're asking me, when should we initiate manga into the curriculum? How should we institute it? Should we do it as if we were reading regular books? That's difficult. It also depends on what you're wanting to teach with that manga. Are you wanting it to be for entertainment purposes? Are you wanting to actually teach literary devices? Are you wanting to teach a certain style of writing? Are you trying to teach how to develop plot, how to develop characters? Because manga does that really well. A lot of manga is really good about developing characters and making sure that they are consistent throughout the story. Most of the manga that I've read has been very good about that. You've also got to look out because, as I've said, some manga is just trash. Some manga is just throwaway. And you've got to make sure that you're finding good, solid works that have a real message to them. You don't want to just have books for entertainment purposes in a curriculum. That's for when children want to read on their own time. In a school curriculum, you want to have books that are serving a purpose, that have a clear, that are teaching the children something. And so therefore it would be difficult, I think, to find a manga that was on par with, say, To Kill a Mockingbird, or a Shakespeare play, or something else that is sort of a staple of our curriculum. That's not to say that they don't exist. That's not to say you couldn't create one. Right now, I'm using with my Spanish students in my class a simplified version of Don Quixote that is a comic book. It can be used. It just has to be very well thought out how you're going to use it. And it has to be, it has to serve a definite purpose. It can't just be arbitrary.